Every world we've landed on has a shoreline somewhere. Solaris has one everywhere. Right now I'm standing with my hand flat against a reef of shells, and the top of it comes up to my chest. Oysters, tube worms, coral. Turned to stone, packed solid, running off both ways to the horizon. Sato followed it for 2 hours and it never ended, because it doesn't end. It goes all the way around the planet. And 900 meters above our heads there's a second one. That's where the water used to stop. So where does an ocean go? This is what we found on Solaris Prime, and we're still trying to understand it. I'll say this up front. Everything we found here got bigger. It started with a shell I could hold in one hand. It ended with a hole that could swallow a sea. The Aurelia came down on the second shelf, and the ground crunched under her feet like frost. It wasn't frost. The whole plain is salt, cracked into a honeycomb of plates, each one about the size of a dining table, with a raised white ridge welded along every seam. Okafor knelt on the first one and laughed. Because we have these at home. Death Valley. Uyuni. Same width, same walls, same everywhere on Earth. Salt water sinks, fresher water rises, and that slow circling under the crust draws the pattern from below. You can stand on a world nobody has ever named and recognize the floor. We knew before we opened the hatch that this had been an ocean. What we didn't expect was how recently it stopped being one. There's no dust drift over the shells, no sand dunes. The reef is still sharp enough to cut a glove. Whatever happened here didn't happen in the deep past. It happened in front of somebody. The city was on the shelf below us, and we had to climb down a crack in a cliff to reach it. That climb is the first thing that told us who lived here. Because the cliff is only a cliff to us. To them, it was a wall of a room. From above, the domes look like bubbles left in wet plaster. The biggest is 2 kilometers across. You could put a small city under it. And Vance measured the shell at about 30 centimeters thick. 30 centimeters, spanning 2 kilometers. There is no way to build that on land. Not with stone, not with steel, not with anything. The math doesn't allow it. It allows it underwater. Water pushes up on everything in it. A whale is fine at sea and dies on a beach. And it isn't the sun that does it. It's its own ribcage, pressing down on its own lungs, in a world that suddenly stopped holding it up. Every arch in that city was drawn by a hand that had never felt full weight. Okafor said it the way you say something you're not ready to have said out loud. None of this is standing. All of it is stranded. We went inside. Getting in was the problem, because the walls have no doors. We walked the outside of a dome for 40 minutes looking for an entrance, and the entrance was over our heads the whole time. They come in through the roof, and through the floor. Up and down are the hallways here. Left and right are just where the furniture is. Inside there are stairs, if you want to call them that. Flat pads sticking out of a spiral column, one every 4 or 5 meters. Straight up, not steps, handholds. You don't climb those, you rise past them and touch one to turn. Sato got up too, and then we had to put a line on her. The people who built this didn't walk anywhere. They swam through their own living rooms. And that's when the strangest part of the whole city made sense. There is no decoration at eye level. None. The walls are blank as a warehouse. Everything they carved, everything they made beautiful, is on the outside top of the roofs. Reliefs. Spirals. Rows of small figures with 5 arms. You can only see any of it from above, hanging in open water, looking down at your own town. That's how they saw their world. We spent an hour on our backs on a roof, looking up at a sky that used to be the ceiling of an ocean, trying to feel it. We couldn't. There's one more thing missing from that city, and it took Vance to notice it. No chimneys, no hearths, no flues, no soot, no kilns. Nothing burned, ever, anywhere. Of course not. You can't light a fire at the bottom of a sea. An entire civilization. Art, engineering, cities you could fit a mountain inside. And not one of them ever saw a flame. Hold that thought. It matters later, and it's the cruelest thing on this planet. We had a city, and we had no people. We got the people 2 shelves down, in a canal. It runs dead straight for 11 kilometers, cut into the rock, and once we dropped into it, we didn't get back out for a long time. because we couldn't stop walking forward. The canal floor is covered in bones, long ones, 9 meters, segmented, like an armored eel laid out end to end. Okafor called them haulers. 6 pairs of paddle limbs, a blunt head, and a yoke. Every single one of them is still in its harness. The straps are mineralized now, hard as the bone, but the buckles are right where somebody fastened them. And behind each team, still hitched, is a barge. We walked past 40 of them, then 80. We stopped counting somewhere past 200. All of them pointed the same direction, downslope, toward the deep. Everything we knew about dead worlds said we were looking at an evacuation. Except the barges are loaded, and they're not loaded with treasure, or grain, or children. They're loaded with pipe. Stacked, banded, sorted by diameter. Thousands of meters of it. Nobody flees carrying plumbing. These weren't refugees. They were a work crew, and they were still heading toward the job when they stopped. So what job do you keep doing while your world is drying out around you? Reyes gave us 1 more hour down there. We took 4. We should have turned back at the canal. We didn't. The bones told us how fast it happened, too. There's no scatter, no struggle. Nothing dragged anything anywhere. They lay down in the harness in the order they were walking. Sato asked whether the water went out slowly, like a tide. Okafor pointed at the reef line and said, no. We've seen this at home. 5.5 million years ago, the Mediterranean shut its door to the Atlantic and evaporated. Not a bay, the whole sea. It left salt on the floor 1.5 miles thick. Over 1 million cubic kilometers of it, 5% of all the salt in every ocean on Earth, dumped in one basin. At its worst, the surface fell 2 kilometers, and the bottom of that basin sat 3 to 5 kilometers below sea level. A desert with hot pools of brine at the bottom. That's not a story. That's under the water people swim in on holiday. It happened to us once. It just happened to us before there was anybody around to write it down. The 4th shelf is where the color starts. Down there, the pans hold water. Not much, and not water you'd want. Brine, saturated, some of it lying in sheets a few centimeters deep over kilometers of flat white. And it's pink. Hot pink in the middle, rust red at the edges, going orange where it's drying. That's alive. That's algae, the kind that packs itself with red pigment when the salt gets close to saturation, exactly like the pink lakes on Earth. After 4 days of white, the 4 of us just stood on the rim of it, not saying anything. There's something obscene about a world that gets lovelier the more of it dies. That's also where we met the 2nd largest thing on this planet. We heard it before we saw it. A dry, heavy dragging sound, and a pause, and then again. It came around the shoulder of a salt ridge about 200 meters off, 30 meters long, longer than the Aurelia, gray, ridged, blunt in front. And it was walking, if you can call it that, on 4 flattened stumps that were pectoral fins about 1 million years ago. It's a filter feeder. Its ancestors hung over these domes, straining the water. That one strains the wind. It takes in salt dust and blows it back out in a slow white plume that hangs behind it like breath on a cold morning. It didn't care about us at all. It has almost no eyes left. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. There is nothing wrong with that animal. It isn't a monster, and it isn't dying, and it isn't lost. It adapted. It won. It's the only large thing on Solaris that's doing fine. It's a sea creature, still swimming, across an ocean that isn't there. Vance broke it up, because Vance was watching the ground. Every step that animal took, the numbers on his pad jumped. We were standing under a colonnade. Thin columns, 30-centimeter roof, all of it built for a world with water in it. He said one word and we ran. And about 9 seconds later, 100 meters of that roof came down behind us in a single sheet, without a crack, without a warning. That's the danger on this planet. Not teeth. Nothing here is trying to kill you. It's just that everything here was built to be held up, and nothing is holding it up anymore. We found the living ones on day 3, and they found us first. 6 of them, standing in a line at the edge of a pink pan, waiting for us to come to them. They're small, chest high, shells thicker and darker than the empty ones up in the city, 3 legs instead of 5 arms, and 2 soft pouches at the neck they keep wetting with a cupped hand. Gills. What's left of them? They are the great-grandchildren of the people who built the domes, and they'd fit in a doorway their ancestors couldn't have used. Nobody reached for anything. Nobody ran. Reyes held us where we were and put a hand out, palm flat, and left it there a long time. Sato went first anyway. Sato always goes first. They took us home. Home is a basin. One basin, 40 meters across, ringed with fitted stone, under a roof of stretched membrane to cut evaporation. The single most protected object on this planet. Maybe 200 of them live around it. And all day, in shifts, they pump. Hand pumps, ceramic, worn smooth. They draw water out of one side of the basin, run it around a stone channel that circles the whole settlement, and pour it back into the other side of the same basin. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't irrigate anything, doesn't drive anything, doesn't clean anything. It goes out, around, and back in. They've done it every day for 600 years. Okafor asked, through the pad, what the pumping was for. The answer came back as 3 words that took her 20 minutes to unpack, and the closest she could get was, so it knows the way back. We stayed the night. There was a young one, maybe a year old, shell still soft enough to flex. Every hour or so, an adult picked it up, walked it to the basin, and dipped it. Just the neck, just for a second, and set it back down on the warm stone. You could hear the sound it made when the water hit those pouches. I've heard a version of that sound from every human child that ever got put in a bath. Nobody in that settlement has ever seen the ocean. Their great-grandparents' never saw it. They are keeping it in a stone tub the size of a swimming pool and passing it hand to hand and waiting. In the morning, they pointed us downslope at the trench and went back to the pumps. The trench is 4 kilometers deep and it takes a full day to walk down into it. The architecture changes as you drop. It gets older and heavier and more careful. That's their whole system. We worked it out on the way down. The deeper a thing is, the older and the more sacred it is. Depth was rank. Depth was history. Everything holy on this world is at the bottom. At the bottom is a hole. It's 400 meters across. You could drop most of a city block into it and not touch the sides. It's ringed by a collar of machined stone blocks, each one bigger than our lander, cut and fitted with a precision nothing else on this planet comes close to. This is the best thing they ever built. You can feel that standing on the rim. And it's breathing. There's mist coming out of it. Thin, steady, catching the low sun and going gold, rising maybe 60 meters before the dry air eats it. After 4 days on a world where the only water is a stone tub full of brine, we were standing over a shaft that is humid. The walls of the shaft are carved, spiraling down as far as our lights reached. We expected a prayer, or a list of the dead, or a name. It's none of those. It's a manual. Numbered panels. Sequences. A hand shape gripping a lever, then the same hand releasing it. Arrows. Volumes. Failure states. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. Drawn the way you draw instructions for someone who has never done this before. The panels start at the top of the shaft, which is the shallow end, which in their language means recent, which means they cut it late, near the end. They weren't writing it for themselves. They were writing it for whoever came next. And that was when it came together, standing on that rim, 4 days too late. They pumped it down. The ocean didn't evaporate off this world and it didn't blow away into space. They opened a hole in their own crust and they put their sea inside it, on purpose, with pumps and pipe and a plan, to clear the shallow shelves for building. It worked. 3 generations of it worked. And it made them rich, and the cities we'd been walking through were built on the land it gave them. And then it kept going. You can open a valve into a planet. Getting it back is a different problem entirely. The barges weren't running away. They were hauling pipe down to this hole to reverse it. They died on the road to the repair, and the water is still there. That's the part that gets me. Okafor's scans put a saturated layer starting about 12 kilometers down, soaked through the fractured rock. Not a cavern, not a sea, just water in the cracks, under a lid of stone. She ran it 3 times. Nobody said anything the 3rd time. We were standing on the driest ground any of us had ever walked, and there was more water under our boots than in every lake on Earth. Sound familiar? In 2024, the seismometer on the InSight lander gave us the same picture of Mars. Enough liquid water in the fractures of the mid-crust, 7 to 12 miles down, to cover that entire planet a mile deep. Mars may not have lost its ocean either. It may have filed it. And under our own feet, in the transition zone 400 miles down, there's a mineral called ringwoodite that holds water inside its structure. A diamond brought a piece of it up in 2014 with about 1% water locked in it by weight. Do that math across the whole layer, and there may be 3 oceans worth of water inside the Earth right now. More below us than above us. We just call the part we can swim in the ocean. We had one thing worth giving them. A survey of that deep layer. Where it's shallowest, where the rock is weakest, where you'd sink a shaft if you ever had the tools. To run it, we needed height. And there's only one piece of height left on Solaris. They call it the tether. It's 900 meters of tapered columns standing alone on the second shelf, with 40 snapped cables hanging off the crown like hair. It used to hold a floating city in place. The city is at the bottom of it, in pieces, in a fan of rubble 2 kilometers wide. The column stayed up. It stayed up for 600 years after the water left it. Reyes made the call to climb it. I want to be clear that it was the right call. Sato set the beacon at 400 meters, on a working ledge, and started down. She was maybe 80 meters below it when we heard the sound. Not a crack. A long, low grinding, like a door in a house settling. One single note that went on for 11 seconds. Then the top third of the tether came off. It fell east. East is the settlement. It didn't hit the people. I want to say that first. It landed 400 meters short of the nearest dwelling, and everyone was already outside because everyone had heard it. What it hit was the ground. And the ground under that settlement is a salt crust with brine underneath it, and the shock went through it like a knuckle through a window pane. The basin split along 3 seams at once. There's no drama to it. That's what nobody tells you. 40 meters of water, 600 years old, went out flat across the pan in a sheet. For about 90 seconds, it was the largest body of open water on the planet. A thin, bright mirror running out over white salt, with the whole sky lying in it. Then it soaked in. Then it was a dark stain. Then, in the wind, it was nothing. 11 minutes, start to finish. 200 of them stood in a ring around where it had been. No one screamed. No one came at us. Nobody blamed anybody. They just stood there. And then the shift that was due started pumping. Around the empty channel. Into the broken basin. Hand to hand, in the same rhythm, over dry stone. Because the pump is not about the water. It never was. It's about knowing the way back. We stayed 4 more days. We gave them the survey. Where to dig, how deep, what they'd hit, and in what order. Cut into the collar stones at the rim of their own shaft, in their own notation, next to the manual their ancestors left for exactly this. Vance welded the last 3 panels himself, alone, and Vance is not a sentimental man. Then we did the arithmetic on the way up, and nobody said it out loud until we cleared the atmosphere. 12 kilometers of rock, hand pumps and ceramic pipe. A people who have never, in their entire history, lit a fire. That's the thing about SALARIS I still can't put down. They didn't lose their ocean. They put it somewhere. And every civilization I know of, including ours, is exactly one clever solution away from doing something enormous that only runs in one direction. We have a dry sea on Earth, too. It's called the Aral. 40 years ago, it was the 4th largest lake in the world. And the boats from the town of Moynac are still sitting on the sand, upright, rusting, 150 kilometers from the nearest water. Nobody dropped a rock on it. We just kept taking. And the taking was reasonable every single year. The tidekeepers are still down there, pumping in a circle around a basin with nothing in it. Sooner or later, somebody there is going to read the manual on that wall the whole way to the bottom. And the thing they've been waiting 600 years for is going to come up. Not out of the sky, the way they've always sung it. Up, out of the floor. We left Solaris Prime behind, but it did not leave us. Somewhere ahead, another world is waiting, and the Aurelia is already moving toward it. The next signal we're following came in as a heat trace on a world with no star, no fuel, and no reason to be warm. And something down there is keeping a single valley at exactly the temperature of a human hand. if you want to travel with us aboard the Aurelia. Subscribe. A new world every week.